when we talk about the in-between, the nexus of our lives, of our reality. So often when we look back at our lives, we look at the milestone moments, these plateaus and footprints that we leave behind as markers of our life's journey. That only makes up about 20 to 30%. The rest is defined and connected by the in-between. Everything that takes place in between. And this is where the art of the spiritual warrior comes in. We can develop the tools and the means to identify all these different elements in our world and become the alchemists of our lives, peering through the nexus and the prism of our multiverse and drawing forth all that we are into the present now. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Has it been a week? Yeah, let's count. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's been a week together. We've been experiencing that. But that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. Perception, time, the experience of what we're going through right now, because damn, just damn. So welcome back. Hello. Pleasure to see everybody. It's been another interesting week, hasn't it? Oh my goodness. For those of us that are delving into the information circuits that are floating around right now, we're going to talk a little bit about the solar eclipse coming up. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the potential theories that are floating around as far as what could be happening in a couple of weeks. We really don't know yet. And we're going to talk a little bit, like I said, about perception, because time has been a fickle mistress lately. Yes, she has. And I've been trying my damnedest to woo her, but it's wooing her and courting time at this point is just, she's running the show. That's the best way to put it. She's running the show. And this is kind of where we find a bit of balance. This is where we're able to find a bit of control. If you end up finding yourself getting swept up in the static or in the high momentum of everything, it may be because you're constantly putting yourself in the way, trying to control things. I know that was a big habit for me for a long time. And even now, it's something that I have to be consciously aware and check myself doing. For me personally, when things start really moving in transit and things are manifesting quickly, or I'm picking up on the energies of a big change or a big manifestation, or I'm seeing into something a lot, whatever it may be, whatever's really getting that going, that and putting that fuel in my engine, I have to be consciously aware of how excited I'm getting about that process, because getting in the way and being like, I'm so excited, I want to be a part of it, and da 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 da, it blocks the natural transitionary flow of not just the energy that's taking place, but actually the destination of where we're headed through the prism of the multiverse, through the experience itself. When we get in the way of that, we're affecting the trajectory of the energy itself, not just receiving it, but where it's headed. And I've personally found it's just easier to accept, acknowledge, and just be grateful for the current transition of that flow, of that momentum. I believe it was from the first Doctor Strange movie. There was a quote, and it's always stuck with me. You cannot beat a river into submission, but you can surrender to its current and utilize it as your own power. And that's part of the biggest journey that I personally went through. And I've written about this in my book, which I'm hoping to get published very, very soon for everybody. But I talked about this in the book, where my sense of control in the situation, and regardless of intention, ends up affecting the situation and wanting to try to control it so desperately puts an inorganic element into the mixture. And what I mean by that is it's manufactured. It's being made by my expectations, by the projection of whether it's shadow, whether it's ego, whether it's wound, whatever. It's something that's not allowing me to just be consciously present in the moment of experience and own that space, own my presence, and own my power in that space. And there was a video I'd seen recently where they talk about the word disappoint, because when we set up those expectations and we try to control things and we set up all these projections of it all, so often when it doesn't work out that way, we end up disappointing ourselves. And when we break that down, we disappoint ourselves from our seat of power in that space. We're literally disappointing ourselves in so many more ways than just how we're using the word. So it's very, very important to me to learn that lesson of surrender. And we've been kind of even misled on the definition of surrender, or at least the context of the energy behind surrender, where we've come to look at it as a very cowardly term, or a very weak response to something, where we're being overpowered, so we must surrender to it, as opposed to being so presently accepting of all the different elements of play, knowing the power of these different elements that are being presented to us, my own personal power, how all of them are applied, utilized, and combined together, and then collaborating with that power, surrendering my ego, surrendering my need to control something, to allow something else to take that lead, while I produce my power in that same space and utilize my role, that is whatever is presented to me. Being adaptable like that really keeps us in a very good grounded space as things continue to transition. Because the one thing that we can count on is nothing stays permanent, including the flow of everything, the flow of experience. It's all real good. It's all real happy at some moments, and then it just goes down, 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 down. Well, do we get wrapped up in the down, or do we think and balance and remember that, oh yeah, it's going to go back up eventually, so maybe I should learn a thing or two while I'm down here? And seeing all these wonderful comments coming in. Thank you so much. The favorite fire keeper, of course. My pleasure to be here. Yes, it's really, really a pleasure to have you all back, and to get to dive into some of this stuff here. So as we're talking about balance and we're talking about surrender, let's talk a little bit about this mistress time. This, I don't want to say lady of the evening. That sounds dirty. Um, so lately, I've been having a lot of conversations with people about how time has been going in their world, because for me, time kicked right up recently. I can't exactly pinpoint when, because it feels like so long ago, but it hasn't been that long. It just feels like it's been that long, because time has been moving so fast for me in my world over this last little while. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate, because a lot of the conversations I've been having recently have been saying the same thing. Our experience of time, the days are going by, the weeks are going by, the months are going by, everything's going by so fast. And yet some things in the moment are feeling dragged out. Like, I remember there was a saying going around in January saying, whew, January was a hell of a year. And it wasn't necessarily for me because of the length of time or the experience of the duration of the month. It's because of how much happened in January. There were so many things, from like the 1st to the 31st. It felt so full. It felt so jam-packed. And that's been a consistent thing all the months of our calendar year of 2024. And when we talk about time, we're going to talk a little bit about the calendar year, because our calendar year in North America, here in Canada, the 12 months, the 30 to 31 to 28/29 days, depending on if you're on a leap year, and 4 weeks in the month and 365 days in a year, yada yada yada. This calendar is not the old traditional calendar. And a lot of people know this already. A lot of people know about the 13 months out of the year. Every month was 28 days. 4 weeks embodied the entire month for each and every month. And that 13th month was a trade-off. And it was, I think, anywhere from like 3 to 7 or 3 to 5 or 3 to 7 days for the entire duration of the 13th month. And all that was for those filler days. They called them the days of basically rest, where a lot of the time in between all the ceremonies that took place over each quarter of the year, right? Each of those 3 months, as we look at the seasonal shifts and we have each of the solstices and the equinoxes, there used to be a lot of things that would take place over each period, each seasonal junction of the year. So that 13th month was considered the rest, and celebrate and do a lot of the gratitude aspect of everything. And it's really, really interesting to note how April is supposed to be the beginning of the actual calendar year. When we look at how we break everything down seasonal wise, having it finish up with the winter and just the breaking at the beginning of our spring, because March is supposed to be that 13th month technically. And if you look at the names of each of the months, you can break it down in that way. September is supposed to be the what month? 7th. October 8. Nov 9. Dec 10. Right? So January would have been 11. February would have been 12. March would have been 13. And I believe it's somewhere around the August region that I think it's between August and September is where the 13th month, where that break was supposed to take place. So when we break it all down and we look at that, March being the 13th month, April being the first, starting things over again, things are kind of in alignment with that. And we can start to look at even in our own world, how things kind of move in accordance in that same fashion. It's not so much based off of the calendar year of our new year starts January 1st. Think about that. Why is our new year supposed to be starting at the end of the technical cycle that is based off of old cosmic alignment with astrology, with seasonal shifts, with the planet itself? It's not based off of a corporate calendar and a business schedule. It's based off of natural alignment with everything. So to go against that grain is one thing, but then to have people set up what they should be doing as the beginning of their year, putting all of that energy into now what's just ending. We've got 2 to 3 months after we put all that energy to the beginning of our new year for the cycle to finish off. Why do you think so many people's resolutions don't hold out? Their New Year's resolutions, these plans to start this incredible new year ahead of them. Well, they put all of that energy into a cycle that is just finishing itself before it dies and renews again in the springtime and is born over. So all that energy goes into the end process, not the beginning process. And when we can look at that new transition of time, the way that the cycles flow and how we move technically in a natural accordance, we just have to put our awareness to that accordance. We start to shift differently. We start to see how things will move differently and within that accordance, as we're talking about now. So the shift currently for me is again that time speeding up. Things are moving really, really fast. A lot of people are saying the same thing. And it's not just the speed moving up, but I'm losing time blocks out of days, and it's happening much, much more frequently than it used to. Throughout my whole life, and I'm sure a lot of us can relate to this too, there'll be times where you just zone out, you blank out for a while, and you kind of go, oh wow, what did I do for the last bit? And but you at least have some kind of recollection. At least I know I do of oh yeah, okay, I zoned out there, and oh, I must have been doing that, or yada yada. Okay, okay. There's some kind of a link, some kind of a physical recollection to where that time went. Recently, no. It's like it didn't even exist. It's just gone. Like, oh, it has to be this time right now. And it's at least an hour or two past. And my internal clock is on point. I haven't used an alarm for like over 10 years because my internal clock has just been so well trained on that. Even with the time shifts and this, like I'm usually very, very accurate with my internal clock. So to be missing entire hour blocks like that, 2 hour blocks like that was very, very out there. And then to have zero recollection of it, like it just didn't exist. It was just gone. What happened to that time block? In some instances, and I know some people experience this too, it is actual leaving, it's astral transition. It's not just astral travel, but it's literal transition where at least when I travel, I know I'm leaving this vessel, this body, excuse me, and I'm projecting my consciousness, my astral energy somewhere. But astral transition is straight up where I just lose that whole sense of this in total context, right? And that's a lot of what's been happening in that instance. But there's also all this stuff about what's going on with the pole shifts right now. And if we look at the way energy flows on a circuit on the planet, which is part and parcel why we have, in my opinion, why we have the essence of the poles. I don't really care about the textbook theories on this stuff right now. I'm going to talk about what I know on the energy conduits and the positions of the poles themselves. Now, magnetics and electricity flow and the ether is a naturally occurring, inarguable concept at this point. And the poles are the balance points for that conduit flow to keep it in an actual rotation on the planet. And this is where I believe the theorization of the rotation of the planet came from, is from this conduit of energy that goes from the north to the south and then back up from the south to the north. From the teachings that I've received on this, that energy flow, that rotation of the planet, this is what keeps us within a state of mental awareness of the physical projection of the realm, which is why we talk about things, and you hear a lot of people talk about the illusionary concept of third dimension, because so much of it is based off of the physical perception and the conscious awareness or capacity of the conscious awareness of the person perceiving the experience. So things like time, things like having these superpowers, these are all things that are trained. They have sects, I should say, of cultures across the world that study all of these different practices to learn these quote unquote superpowers. But a lot of it is just harnessing the understanding of the energy flow of what's already taking place in the ether and the perception and conscious awareness and capacity of the human vessel perceiving that energy. So time is in accordance of this energy flow. And as the poles are shifting right now, and that flow is changing and it's shifting, and the continents themselves are shifting, and the weather patterns are changing, all of the earth itself is shifting along with the poles themselves, including the energy. We are shifting with it, including our perception. And this is where I believe a lot of the time stuff is really stemming from, as well as there's the talks of what's happening physically on the planet, which is where we're going to lead into next, some of the eclipse talks and this and that. But before we jump right into that, I want to talk a little bit about the physical responses that the planet is giving right now during this energetic shift. The poles changing are not just part of the energy circuit of the planet, but it's also part of the physical representation of the planet. So look at how it works in the body. for example, when our energy flow is working properly, that all circuits are on high, there's no blockages, we've got a healthy body response. We've got a healthy shift in the body. It grows properly, it changes properly, this and that. When there's blockages, it's not so healthy. It doesn't shift in the right way. Regardless of context on health wise or unhealth wise, that energy flow affects the physical layout of whatever circuit or whatever conduit that energy is a part of. Same thing works on the planet. So that energy flow between the poles is what holds the continents within a certain position. This is where all the past shifts took place. Yes, there were some external planetary stuff, asteroids, I'm sure, and things like that. I can't discredit those. But the energy flow and how it's all held together, to me, and we can talk about things like the firmament and this and that, but I also believe a lot of that has to do with just the natural energy of the planet, the way things have evolved in this particular space in third dimension reality. It has a symbiotic circuit. It knows how to take care of itself. It always has. This planet has always been able to take care of itself in so many more ways than we can possibly understand. So I feel like that energetic flow and the poles are part of why it's or part of that caretaking aspect of itself. So it's part of how the continents are held together, how the face of the planet is held together. So as all of that's shifting, we're getting a lot of different physiological responses from the planet. We even have some incredible people like our Miss Norma through Adventures and her shows on here. Who she's a Gaia worker. She speaks. She's a Terra communicator is probably one of the best ways to put it. She is able to speak with the actual land masses, the rocks, the formations of the land around, because it all has consciousness, it all has history, it all has stories to tell, and it's all going through its own shift. So that type of extrasensory perception is also at an all-time high right now because the planet is so active. Terra communicators and people who are sensitive to those frequencies are receiving a lot more on those frequency levels as well. So it's a very, very interesting time for those that are able to be the nature bridges, the nature connection, the nature avatars, if you will, because there was once a time where plant life and the natural life on this planet, the flora, the trees, the plant, it was a lot more physically conscious than we give it credit for. And this is something that I truly, truly believe that once upon a time, things used to actually move with a conscious intent, physically move with a conscious intent, plant life, trees, things like that. So to have communication with them is not far off. We already know that it affects them on a cellular level, on a physical level, to commune with nature around us. So why wouldn't it be able to talk back? You just got to know the language, that's all. So there's a lot of that's taking place now. There's something else that I've been hearing about and studying on some of these physiological symptoms on the planet. A lot of videos going around on this too, of the planets, Nibiru, Planet X, whatever you want to call it, but having this extra interstellar body in our constellation right now, things that we aren't being told about. The theory and context of space, that's a whole different discussion. If we have time, I may dabble into that, but that's a big, big, deep rabbit hole that I'm going to get into, because my theories on what space is, what planets are, this and that, stemming from the whole flat Earth, round Earth, blah 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 blah. It goes deep, y'all. It goes deep. So we're gonna shelve that for now, and we're just gonna talk about Planet X in general. Okay. So some of what I've been hearing about Planet X, in accordance with the energy flows between the poles on the planet as they're shifting, the teachings that I've received on the circuit on the planet is when it goes down from north to south, and it goes kind of, if you look at it, it's almost going inward. It tightens up the space on the planet, the physical, I mean, not physical, the physiology of the planet itself. It tightens it up, makes it nice and condensed and concentrated. When it goes back up from south to north, it loosens itself off. And this is the natural thing. It's almost like it's kind of breathing. And you got to look at it when we're looking at things in frequency and energy wise. It's a pulse, it's a wavelength, it's just a natural way of energy. As Nibiru has been getting closer, according to these teachings, when the energy goes again north to south, it tightens up. But then when it goes from south to north and it loosens, the closer that this planet is coming into the vicinity, and the planet loosens itself off, it's actually the Nibiru itself is pulling up more on the planet than it would just release naturally, which is where we're getting a lot of the stuff like the earthquake fault lines, not just earthquakes, but fault lines of earthquakes. Like something is causing a tear, like it pulled up and it just went. Volcanic activity is at an all-time high. There are places where they're having volcanoes where they didn't even realize volcanoes were there. Places like Yellowstone are having more activity than they've had in hundreds of years, and far more than they projected at this point in time. And it's all seeming to be in alignment with these teachings and with a lot of these theories and these concepts. So I don't discredit them. I haven't seen one way or another, but I go based off of what my intuition tells me when I receive this information, because that resonance, that internal meter, as it gets further and further developed for each of us, it never lies. It never lies. It may lead you to discover a truth deeper than what you expected, but it never ever lies, and it will never steer you in the wrong direction when you simply follow that intuitive draw. And this is where it's led me so far. Some really interesting topics, because as we're talking about it coming back into Nibiru, coming back into constellation, and people are catching these really interesting things on camera and on film. We have a lot of disclosure stuff that's been coming out lately, and I mean, there are things being discovered in Peru. There are things being discovered in the Middle East. There are things being built all over the place, big giant altars and things like that. And even, what was it? Did Drake build a pyramid or a sarcophagus or something? The rapper Drake. I mean, there's some crazy stuff that's happening when you look at it from a very what the hell's going on here type of view perspective, because there's so much information that's being withheld from us. It's not that these things don't make sense, it's we don't have the information to put it all together, and those that do, it makes a little different sense to them, I'll just say that. So it's interesting to see all of the stuff happening at the same time as we're coming to this thing like the solar eclipse, because as we're catching all of these incredible things on camera, these new discoveries, these new disclosures, even the guy who opened the Stargate portal in his bedroom to Sedona. If anyone hasn't seen that video, if you can search it up, just type in maybe Stargate portal Sedona and see what comes up, because a guy in the video that I saw used sound and light frequencies to literally open up a Stargate in his bedroom. Now, I've seen a bunch of these things, and I've seen how it's been CG edited and yada, yada, yada. And I look at them and I go, no, that's fake. Or, sometimes where you see the ghost busting videos or the demon hunting stuff, and it's just people putting on a show for clickbait in a lot of instances. But those of us that have had the real encounters and have trained, like I was talking about just a minute ago, that intuitive radar sense, we can feel the difference between, oh yeah, that's how it felt when I had that real encounter, and this is just bullshit. This is entertainment. So I watched the Stargate thing and I'm thinking to myself, it could be a good watch, could be fun, just entertaining. But when he's starting to play around with the frequencies, and I saw the light, this little tiny light fracture appear above his bed, and then it just started to illuminate further and further. When I saw the light, everything in my body, my whole frequency went, I've seen that before. And it was the same resonantial frequency that I got in my body when I've done astral travel, when I've gone interdimensional journeys, all of that stuff. So I knew he was playing with the right frequencies. And you see it kind of open up in this crystal clear picture of just a valley in Sedona. So please go check out that video if you haven't had the chance yet, because all of these things are happening again as we're coming up on this time of the eclipse. Now, what's going on with the eclipse? There's so much talk about what's going on with the eclipse. Everything from the actual star charts and the astrology of everything isn't lining up. The lunar, solar, and planetary alignments, according to people's apps and people's star charts that they've been following for a long time, all show that things aren't lined up to have a solar eclipse right now. So how come there's a solar eclipse taking place? That's already step number one. It's already getting you thinking all pretzel brained. Like, what do you mean there's no alignment? But there's an eclipse happening? Yeah, okay, we're going to keep going with this. So that's some of the talks that's going on. There's other talks going into some of the activity that we've been seeing, the fault lines of earthquakes. The stuff in the States, it just happens to be across the same proposed trajectory of the solar eclipse. It's in that exact same fault line area. It happens to be crossing over a number of locations named Nivida, which, going back to scriptures and old teachings, there has a large significance placed on the names and locations of Nineveh. So there's a lot of theory that these things are leading up to a lot of prophecies and a lot of prophetic meanings behind them, not just and I mean, we've had doomsday theories in the past, stuff like 2012. And for example, when 2012 happened, according to the Star Nation teachings and the inner scoop, if you want to call it that, the prophecies weren't wrong. It just didn't happen the way everyone had expected it to, where the end of the world that took place in 2012 was the timeline convergence, where depending on where your consciousness was, depending on the choices you were making all the way up to that point, and during the time of the convergence, meant that the world as you knew it was ending. And as we hit that energetic convergence, what was supposed to come out as the next branch of everything started to expand back into a new expression of creation was going to dictate what world you were going to be perceiving, what world you were going to be experiencing. This is where a lot of people were talking about so many humans getting shifted to a new earth and to the new higher dimensions. It starts in here and then it goes outward. That's the only way that we can reach that. If we aren't making the shift internally, everything that we perceive remains at that exact same vibrationary level. So it has to start inwards, and that's where those choices were coming into play. So we have all of this stuff happening prophecy-wise, right? Interpretation of what's going on with the solar eclipse prophecy-wise is very, very important right now. Very important. Because how we interpret prophecy can be manipulated. It can have us controlled in a variety of ways. One of the easiest ways of control is making you feel forced to do option A and then making you believe that it was your choice to do option B instead. The old bait and switch type thing, right? Where they force you into a corner. You only had, they were giving you the two options. They wanted you to do either or. It didn't matter to them. It doesn't matter when they're forcing you. You have to do this. You have to do this. No, I'm going to do B instead. And I was like, no, we didn't want you to. That was the whole plan. It was the whole plan the whole time. So manipulation works very, very easily when we're convinced of something, and then we have all of that emotional backing, like, oh, prophecy's being fulfilled. So there's even talks that we could be engaging in false flag territory or ease of false flag operations during these types of time periods, because the emotional upheaval and then the collective mass of that And Men in Black, Tommy Lee Jones, he said that the person is smart, people are dumb, panicky, crazy animals, and we know it. And in essence, until we can collectively reach that balance point, that statement still holds true. Because all of us as individuals are able to calm down for the most part and rationalize and make sense of things. It's harder to do when we have a state of emotional upheaval. It's very hard to calm ourselves down if we're surrounded in a group of people that are in emotional upheaval and everyone's just projecting that onto each other. Remember, our auras radiate at a 30-foot space, a 30-foot span at pretty much any given time. So within a 30 feet space, you're interacting with other people's emotions, auras, their energetic state. And when everyone's putting in all that energy and motion, that emotion into their aura in an unconscious manner, and nobody's grounded, come on. Like there's it's self-explanatory. So to be able to balance ourselves, ground ourselves, show such love and vulnerability for the processes we're going through right now, it's going to make it easier to hold that space as things like prophecies start to come true. So, again, the interpretations of these prophecies. What are the prophecies that we're talking about? Well, there's a lot of talk of it, the black sun, for example, where if we look into Masonic teachings or old stories, even from older cultures, I can't remember which ones in particular, but there are many accounts of the black sun being spoken about, and in the instance of the black sun, what it is supposedly a frequency, a band of light that normally we can't see with our own naked eyes, and the only time that we do see it is when it appears as a time of an eclipse on the sun itself. There are other teachings, like in the Masonic teachings, for example, where black hole sun is a part of the inner earth, and it's part of the, I don't know if it's just the vortex frequency of inner earth itself, or the light frequencies, or all of it combined. I haven't really received that deep of Masonic teachings. Um, but yes, there's some talks about, black hole sun coming. There's talks about the rapture taking place right now because of the way that the fault lines are coming up, and according to how the solar eclipse is moving, it's falling in line with religious prophecies of, Messiah coming or Antichrist coming in some instances. So these are all big things that could really be used as false flag operations during this time if we aren't paying close attention to how we're interpreting the way prophecy comes to pass. Because again, when we're speaking to universe and universe is speaking to us, it doesn't speak human, it speaks universe, it just speaks energy. So how we interpret it is going to be based off of our own personal bias, how open we are to the interpretation of the universe, and then our state, our own state, emotional state, consciousness state, maturity state, and how we choose to express that back. Which is why so many times things got twisted up in a state of shadow and ego when people were interpreting messages from Christ consciousness or from higher vibrational states. Yet the frequency of the lower consciousness state didn't quite align with what was coming in. So it's, again, our interpretation is going to be really big on that. There is also the talks of CERN becoming active. And if those of you watching, if you don't know what CERN is, please go look it up. CERN. The CERN and the Hydra Collider, Large Hydra Collider in is it Sweden? I believe it's Sweden. It is supposed to be. It's been deactive for a while since the last time they opened it up. I can't remember when, but it's been deactive for a little while. And it's supposed to be reactivated, and they've been prepping it for the last one. When's it reactivating, you say? Oh, yes, April 8th, the same day as the solar eclipse. So, I mean, like, there's just all these little things. And when you really start to surrender to universe and work in collaboration with the universe, you understand coincidences aren't really coincidences anymore. They're absolutely pieces of the puzzle in every way, shape, or form. Um, so what do I think? What do I think is happening? Well, Bucko, Chumley, Scooter, are you ready? I personally think, sorry, there's another piece of information. I teased you there. There's also all the talks, especially within the States. I don't know if it's been happening in Canada so much too, but there's the talks across the States. They're shutting schools down. They are telling people to stock up on like 2 weeks worth of groceries, get your gas, power might go out. That's a really big preparation for just a solar eclipse. And what's with all the trains recently transporting all the military stuff all over the place, too? That's been happening for the last few years, but everyone thought it was for the COVID camps. And as well, that's not really so much a full enforced thing anymore. So, where are they going? Um, there's a lot, like, there's just so much happening. So, what do I think? Um, More on that next time. No, I'm just kidding. I personally think that, so I know the poles are shifting, and I know that that energy conduit of the planet is being affected right now. Not just from theories making sense, but from my own personal experiences. Do I know we are getting closer to the point of the dimensional veil for those in the state of perception and those in the awareness and the frequency range to pick it up, that dimensional veil is thinning, or it's becoming more tangible for those of us in that state? Yes, I know that. I'm very aware of that, again, from teachings and from personal experiences. I think something's going to happen on the solar eclipse. Now, and this is where false flags get me all jimble jambled, because I understand how the distraction techniques work. Look over here while this takes place over here, or look over here so you don't pay attention to what we're doing. I really prefer the A, where it's look over here so you're not looking over here, or and this just gets to happen, right? Because again, as we talked about at the beginning of the show today, that interference, that state of control, even a state of excitement, wanting to be involved in the process, blah 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 blah, we could be interfering with the natural process of something that really really needs to happen on a cosmic level. So keep us distracted, or keep us distracted because we need to be shady and we need to hide some stuff as that control mechanism, right? So it's a big toss up. What do I actually think is going to be happening? I think that band, that frequency band of the dimensional veil, is going to be very very thin during that eclipse, and I believe that those with the know-how and the resources, because this can go from anything from current technology to ancient technology to, I mean, household stuff, if you know what you're doing. So those with the know-how and the resources are going to be able to utilize that time period of the thinning of the veil. Does that mean portals are going to open? Yeah, I do. I believe that some portals are going to open in some locations with those that are doing things in the right manner. Where those portals go and what kind of portals are being opened is a very broad answered and very branched contextual topic or subject to be able to enlighten on. One of the earliest trainings I received from my intuitive guides and from my spirit guides was that I was a gatekeeper, and I believe I've talked about this before. As I've learned more about what it means to be a gatekeeper, gates and portals come in so many varieties, they come in so many shapes, they come in so many builds and forms. So when I talk about portals opening up all over the place, I mean everything from physical stargates that will lead from one physical location to another physical location. And whether that's one place on Earth to another place on Earth, or um, to another part of the galaxy, or to a different dimension. Other portals are beyond the physical perception limitations, right? And Shay brought something up that NASA is also supposed to be firing rockets on April 8th, which is true. NASA is supposed to be firing rockets. So other portals that are going to be opening up are going to be more energetic. They're going to be more about receiving the transition that's taking place, putting things into, making sure that as we're surrendering to that current, the flow of the current, we're not becoming absent in the process, because there is a difference between being still and doing nothing. When we do nothing, we exchange nothing, we express nothing, we receive nothing, nothing happens. When we're still, we are allowing the transition, we are being present and accounted for, and honing our space, but allowing and surrendering the flow, knowing that it's just a part of the experience at that time. So a lot of the portals are going to be opening up are going to be about that for people too, stepping into that new space of receiving, exchanging, and just getting the hell out of the way. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be, I could really spend almost a whole call getting into the variety of portals and some of the things that I've seen come through them. So for the most part, what I'm saying is be consciously aware during this next time period of transition, because whether it's a portal in somebody's heart, whether the solar eclipse turns into a giant stargate and we see ships or creatures coming up, Cthulhu throws a tentacle out of there or something, who the hell knows? Whatever what takes place, it's about you internally expressing that outwards and affecting the perception of your immediate reality that you're receiving. That's the most important part of all of this. Absolutely all of it. Because the physical details are something that's ever changing. It's something that is slightly indifferent when we look at it from a higher universal perspective of creation needs destruction. It's part of the duality of the third dimension. It's part of the light and dark aspect. So there's an indifference that takes place in that physical realm. And to be able to remove ourselves from that indifference is vital during these time periods. So I encourage you all to really remember that it's about that state of conscious presence, and knowing that in order to reach things like fourth, fifth dimension, anything higher than that, as far as an actual experiential reality, it starts in here. This isn't going to change if the way we receive hasn't changed, if the way we perceive hasn't changed. That needs to shift first, because that's the source of the reality. That's the source of your reality. While we live in a shared plane of existence, thanks to beings like Gaia, and again, part of my theory on what space is, that's a shared plane of existence that we all get to play in together. But your reality as you know it, the experiences of this life, the expression of creation that you get to go through, doesn't exist without you. You are the only source of that. So knowing that, please understand, to shift outward, it has to shift inward first. And then everything kind of goes and it just reformats itself. And it makes that sound too. Once you hear that sound, the Squidward sound, you know you're doing the work. Oh, what a beautiful sound that. Oh, it gives me tingles. Well, we're coming up on the last little bit here, everybody. I hope these have been wonderful talks. I'm stoked on what's going to happen, because if stuff like the grid goes down, that's a perfect time to initiate things like the reset, for example. get people used to the idea of Jasara coming into place, and all those wonderful talks that we had on our show with Lonnie about the abundance of the world. Should it have to, you know, be a big kind of panic setting? No, not necessarily. But again, the person is smart. People are just dumb, panicky, stupid. Yeah. Thank you, Tommy Lee Jones. We're getting to this degree, and we're going to continue to have these types of experiences because, again, the indifference of life doesn't change. The way we perceive it does. So the more that we go through those types of experiences, having the big moments, it shifts the entire state of consciousness, not just the individual state, but the collective state of consciousness. And we get to go through them and we improve each and every time so that the next time it happens, we don't panic as much. We hold more of a balance. We hold more of that collective consciousness. This is where our capacity starts to shift from past civilizations and past generations that had resources to things that are withheld from us now. So when we look at old ancient Sumeria, Lemuria, Atlantis, Egypt, all of these civilizations that, according to our standards now, were far more advanced than they should have been. Part of it was, yes, due to the interaction with some interdimensional associates, is a good way of putting it. But a lot of it had to do with the resources that they were granted because of that interaction. So the knowledge, the ancient knowledge that they had, the technological prowess without needing things like microchips or electricity as we know it, being able to tap into things like the ether, the natural power sources of the planet itself, the conduits, having all of these resources led them to having things like stargates within the pyramids and certain interactions that, you know, cultures like Atlantis would get into genealogy in a very, very deep way. They had resources at a time very early on in human capacity development. Again, as we're talking about these big events that take place that affect the collective consciousness, as many of those that we've gone through throughout the generations, you know, it's less and less and less when we go back to the beginning of civilizations. So the capacity of that state of humanity back then didn't match the resources that they were given. And I believe Star Nation knew this. And Star Nation said, we still have to give them the resources anyways, because they understood those series of events that would take place would help raise the collective, not just the individual consciousness. Because Star Nation is only in those places because they've gone through those same motions themselves. So I truly believe that that was instrumental and it was strategic, knowing that certain evolutionary traits needed to be grown out of, you know, the ego, the deitizing of everything, the shadow of man needed to become balanced again. So we've gone through civilization after civilization, generation after generation, forgetting that sense of divinity, those resources and that knowledge being withheld from us, yet at the same time continuing to cycle generation and generation, civilization after civilization, through states of conscious growth. This isn't the first time that societies across the planet have reached for something beyond themselves, an understanding beyond just human life on Earth. This is nowhere near the first time we've done it. We've done it over and over and over again, each time increasing our capacity, increasing our collective consciousness. Well, those that escalated in the state of individual power were worried about the individual control mechanisms. If we can control individuals, we control them as a collective. In somewhat of a sense, I can see how that theorizes, but it doesn't affect the natural accordance of evolution. The way that Star Nation knew things were going to happen, the more and more of those types of events took place, we would move out of that individual state of consciousness and move into the collective state where you cannot be reduced to individual control and individual manipulation. This is the most important part of being part of the collective. It's not about being assimilated so you lose your sense of individuality. It's becoming incorporated and collaborated with the support and the backing of the entire collective for your individuality. So it can't be manipulated. It's empowered. It's a very, very different concept. So yes, I mean, it's such an interesting time period that we're going to be getting to within how I think we need to be looking at these next few weeks. Just be prepared. When things physically happen, when things physically take place, your state of consciousness is the biggest stir. Oh, well, yeah, like there are portals opening up all over the place. I just right at the top of my spine, at the base of my skull, and at the top of my spine, I just had a big one open up. So yeah, I mean, much love to everybody as we're gonna get to this. Stay tuned. What happens if the power goes out? How are you gonna stay tuned? Stay tuned here, here, and here. Not here, here, here. Open it up, and here. And then that's going to transition up into the crown and into everything else as we're going through, because it's if the power goes out and we start to hit a reset, what better time to start to bring back some of the ancient teachings of Tartaria, for example, where the buildings, entire buildings and cities and civilizations were tapped in, excuse me, to the ether, the Ethernet. Why do we call it the Ethernet? Well, because it's a network. It's around us all the time. We can't start on rabbit holes when we've got 4 minutes in the show. My goodness. Yeah, it's exciting. It's just exciting. And I hope time doesn't move too quick for you. And I hope that you are able to balance yourself as you surrender to this flow right now, knowing that that surrender is one of the most powerful things that you can do for yourself. Again, the difference between being still and doing nothing. Being still requires consciousness, it requires dedication, it requires intention. Bring that essence, bring your power. Don't bring expectation. Don't disappoint yourself from your seat of power during this experience. I love you guys. And I think we're going to wrap it up before I just start to ramble, because there are either rabbit holes I'm going to open up and then we don't have time to get into them, or I'm just going to lose my train of thought on stuff. So I'm going to wrap it up for here, guys. I love you so much. We're going to see you next week. And stay tuned, because when those portals are getting up, whoo-wee, veil's getting down, you guys got some time. See, I'm already doing it. Rabbit holes. I'm rambling. Cut me off, Norma. Cut me off. I love you guys.